Daniel Morrison trusted his fire chief like a father. For 15 years, Chief Patterson had been his mentor, his hero, until the night Daniel discovered why they always arrived too late to poor neighborhoods, and why Patterson's bank account had more money than a fire chief should ever see. The Brotherhood, Captain Daniel Morrison, had been fighting fires for 15 years, and in all that time, he had never questioned the chain of command. The Oakland Fire Department was more than his job, it was his brotherhood, his calling, and his identity. At 38, Daniel had risen through the ranks based on his courage, his leadership, and his unwavering dedication to saving lives. Fire Chief Robert Patterson had been Daniel's mentor since his first day as a rookie. Patterson was the veteran who commanded respect throughout the department and the city. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair, and the weathered face of someone who had run into burning buildings when others ran out. To Daniel, Patterson represented everything a fire chief should be: brave, decisive, and absolutely committed to protecting Oakland's citizens. Daniel lived in a modest two-bedroom house in North Oakland with his wife Maria, a nurse at Highland Hospital, and their 8-year-old daughter Sophia. The house was nothing fancy, but it was theirs, paid for with Daniel's captain's salary and Maria's nursing income. They had chosen their neighborhood carefully: good schools, safe streets, and close enough to the firehouse that Daniel could be home for dinner most nights when he wasn't on duty. Station 19, where Daniel served as captain, was located in downtown Oakland and covered a diverse area that included both affluent hills neighborhoods and struggling flatland communities. Daniel took pride in serving all of Oakland's residents equally, regardless of their zip code or economic status. In his mind, a fire was a fire, and every citizen deserved the same rapid response and professional service. What Daniel didn't realize was that his idealistic view of fire department operations didn't match the reality of how Chief Patterson had been running the department for the past several years. The corruption had started small and grown gradually, making it nearly invisible to dedicated firefighters like Daniel, who focused on the work rather than the politics. But on a sweltering July evening in 2023, Daniel's faith in his mentor and his department would be shattered in a way that would force him to choose between his loyalty and his conscience. The pattern emerges. The first sign that something was wrong came during a routine shift briefing on a Tuesday morning. Daniel was reviewing response times from the previous week when he noticed an unusual pattern in the data. Calls to the hills, neighborhoods, areas with expensive homes and high property values consistently showed response times of 3 to 4 minutes. Calls to East and West Oakland, predominantly low-income areas, showed response times averaging 12 to 15 minutes. Daniel initially assumed the discrepancy was due to geographic factors. The hills were closer to some fire stations, and traffic patterns could affect response times. But as he dug deeper into the data over several weeks, the pattern became too consistent to explain away with geography alone. "Chief," Daniel said during one of their weekly one-on-one meetings, "I've been looking at our response time data, and I'm seeing some concerning trends. We're consistently slower getting 2 calls in the flatlands. Should we be adjusting our deployment strategies?" Chief Patterson barely looked up from his paperwork. "Response times are what they are, Morrison. We do our best with the resources we have. Some areas are just harder to reach. But Chief, we're talking about a difference of 10 minutes or more. That's the difference between saving a structure and losing it completely. Between saving lives and—" Daniel trailed off. Patterson finally looked up, his expression harder than Daniel had ever seen it. "Captain Morrison, I appreciate your attention to detail, but I need you to focus on running your crew, not analyzing department-wide statistics. That's my job." Daniel left the meeting feeling unsettled. In 15 years of working under Patterson, he had never been dismissed so curtly. Something was wrong. But Daniel couldn't yet comprehend the scope of what he was beginning to uncover. Over the next month, Daniel began paying closer attention to dispatch procedures and response protocols. He noticed that calls from certain neighborhoods were often given lower priority classifications, even when the reported emergencies seemed serious. He observed that some of his fellow captains seemed reluctant to discuss response times in certain areas. The breakthrough came when Daniel was reviewing equipment maintenance logs and noticed unusual patterns in how fire trucks were deployed. Trucks were frequently out of service for maintenance during peak call times in low-income neighborhoods, but always seemed to be available immediately when calls came from affluent areas. The revelation. The night that changed everything was August 15, 2023. Daniel was working the overnight shift when a call came in at 2:47 a.m. Structure fire, East Oakland, possible occupants trapped. Daniel's crew was closest to the scene and should have been dispatched immediately. Instead, Chief Patterson's voice came over the radio. Engine 19, respond non-emergency to East 14th Street fire. No rush, it's probably another vagrant situation. Daniel stared at the radio in disbelief. A structure fire with possible occupants was never a non-emergency situation. Regardless of the neighborhood or the circumstances, every firefighter learned that the first few minutes of response could mean the difference between life and death. Chief, this is Captain Morrison. Dispatch is reporting possible trapped occupants. Shouldn't this be a Code 3 response? Negative, Captain. Proceed, non-emergency. That's an order. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He was being ordered to deliberately delay his response to a fire where people might be dying. Against every instinct and 15 years of training, he was supposed to drive slowly to a scene where seconds could save lives. But Daniel Morrison hadn't become a firefighter to follow orders that put lives at risk. He switched his radio to a different channel and told his crew, "We're going Code 3, gear up." When they arrived at the scene 7 minutes later, still 3 minutes faster than they would have with a non-emergency response, they found a 2-story apartment building fully engulfed in flames. A small crowd had gathered on the street, and Daniel could hear screaming from inside the building. "How long has it been burning?" Daniel shouted to a neighbor. "At least 20 minutes. There's a family on the second floor, they can't get out." Daniel and his crew immediately began rescue operations. They managed to save 3 people, including a 6-year-old girl, but an elderly man on the second floor had already succumbed to smoke inhalation. If they had arrived even 5 minutes earlier, if they had responded with the urgency the situation demanded, that man might still be alive. As Daniel stood outside the smoldering building, watching paramedics work on the survivors, he made a decision that would change the course of his life. He was going to find out why Chief Patterson had ordered a delayed response, and he was going to make sure it never happened again. The investigation. Daniel began his investigation carefully, knowing that if Chief Patterson was involved in something corrupt, direct confrontation could be dangerous for his career and potentially his safety. He started by accessing dispatch records and response data that he had legitimate reasons to review as a captain. What he discovered over the following weeks was a systematic pattern of delayed responses to low-income neighborhoods, reclassification of emergency calls to lower priority levels, and strategic deployment of equipment that ensured slower response times in areas where property values were lower. But the most disturbing discovery came when Daniel gained access to Chief Patterson's computer while the chief was attending a community meeting. Among Patterson's files, Daniel found correspondence with executives from Consolidated Insurance Group, one of the largest property insurance companies in California. The emails revealed a conspiracy that made Daniel's blood run cold. Chief Patterson was being paid $50,000 per month to ensure delayed response times to certain neighborhoods, allowing fires to cause maximum damage before firefighters arrived. The insurance company would then deny claims based on inadequate fire suppression or declare properties total losses, avoiding expensive rebuilding costs. The scheme was diabolical in its simplicity. By delaying response times by just 10 to 15 minutes, the fire department could ensure that structure fires in targeted neighborhoods would result in complete property destruction. Homeowners would lose everything. Insurance companies would pay minimal claims, and Chief Patterson would receive substantial kickbacks for his cooperation. Daniel found bank records showing that Patterson had received over $600,000 in payments from Consolidated Insurance Group over the past 18 months. The money was being funneled through a consulting company that Patterson had established, making the payments appear legitimate on the surface. But the most horrifying discovery was a spreadsheet tracking successful outcomes, fires in low neighborhoods where delayed responses had resulted in total property loss. The spreadsheet included the names and addresses of families who had lost their homes, their possessions, and in some cases, their lives because of Patterson's corruption. Daniel printed copies of the evidence and stored them in a safety deposit box. He knew he was gathering proof of crimes that had resulted in deaths and the destruction of hundreds of families. But he also knew that exposing Patterson would mean the end of his own career and potentially put his family at risk. The confrontation. Daniel spent 3 sleepless nights deciding what to do with the evidence he had uncovered. His wife Maria noticed his distress and pressed him for answers, but Daniel was afraid to tell her the truth. How could he explain that the fire department he had served faithfully for 15 years was involved in a conspiracy that was literally letting people die for money? On the 4th night, Daniel made his decision. He called in sick to work and drove to the FBI field office in San Francisco. Special Agent Jennifer Rodriguez listened to Daniel's story and reviewed the evidence he had collected. Her expression grew increasingly grim as she absorbed the scope of the conspiracy. "Captain Morrison, what you've uncovered appears to be systematic corruption that has resulted in multiple deaths and millions of dollars in insurance fraud. This is one of the most serious cases of public safety corruption we've encountered." Agent Rodriguez explained that the FBI would need to conduct a thorough investigation before taking action. In the meantime, Daniel would need to continue working, normally while wearing a recording device to gather additional evidence of Patterson's activities. "I need you to understand that this investigation could take months, and during that time, more fires will occur in the targeted neighborhoods. Can you continue working under these circumstances?" Daniel thought about the elderly man who had died in the East Oakland fire, about the families who had lost their homes, about his own daughter who attended school in one of the neighborhoods, being deliberately neglected by the fire department. "Agent Rodriguez, I became a firefighter to save lives. If I don't help you stop this, more people are going to die. I'll do whatever you need me to do." Over the next 6 weeks, Daniel wore a wire to work and recorded conversations with Chief Patterson. The evidence he gathered revealed the full extent of the conspiracy, including the involvement of 3 other fire captains who were receiving smaller payments to ensure compliance with the delayed response protocols. The most damning recording came when Patterson explicitly instructed Daniel to take your time responding to a fire in West Oakland, explaining that some neighborhoods just aren't worth the risk to our equipment and personnel. The RSKONING The FBI moved swiftly once they had sufficient evidence. On a Tuesday morning in October, federal agents arrested Chief Patterson at his home, along with the 3 corrupt captains and 5 executives from Consolidated Insurance Group. The coordinated operation also included searches of fire department facilities and the insurance company's offices. Daniel was placed in protective custody during the arrests, as the FBI was concerned that other corrupt officials might try to retaliate against him. The news of the arrests sent shockwaves through Oakland and the entire Bay Area, as residents learned that their fire department had been deliberately allowing their homes and neighborhoods to burn. The investigation revealed that the conspiracy had been responsible for at least 12 deaths and the destruction of over 300 homes in low-income neighborhoods over an 18-month period. Families who had lost everything in fires that the fire department could have contained were victims of a deliberate criminal conspiracy designed to maximize insurance company profits. Chief Patterson was ultimately convicted on charges including conspiracy, wire fraud, racketeering, and criminally negligent homicide. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. The corrupt captains received sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years, and the insurance executives were sentenced to between 12 and 20 years. Consolidated Insurance Group was fined $2.3 billion and was required to pay full replacement costs for all properties that had been deliberately allowed to burn. The company was also banned from operating in California and faced criminal charges in multiple other states where similar schemes were discovered. The aftermath: Daniel's role in exposing the conspiracy made him a hero to some and a pariah to others. While many Oakland residents praised his courage in stopping the corruption, some firefighters and department administrators viewed him as a traitor who had violated the Brotherhood's code of loyalty. The Oakland Fire Department underwent a complete restructuring following the scandal. New leadership was brought in from outside agencies. Response protocols were completely overhauled, and extensive oversight mechanisms were implemented to prevent future corruption. Daniel was offered a promotion to Fire Chief, but he declined, preferring to remain a captain and focus on the operational aspects of firefighting rather than administration. He did accept a role in training new firefighters, emphasizing the importance of ethical decision-making and public service over departmental loyalty. The personal cost to Daniel and his family was significant. They received death threats from associates of the corrupt officials, forcing them to move to a different neighborhood and change their daily routines. Maria struggled with anxiety knowing that her husband's life could be in danger because of his decision to expose the corruption. But there were positive changes as well. Response times to low-income neighborhoods improved dramatically under the new leadership. Fire-related deaths and property losses decreased significantly as the department returned to its core mission of protecting all Oakland residents equally. Several families who had lost their homes in fires caused by delayed responses filed successful lawsuits against the insurance company and received substantial settlements. A memorial was established to honor the victims who had died because of the conspiracy, and new policies were implemented to ensure that such corruption could never again take root in the fire department. The legacy. 2 years after the arrests, Daniel was invited to speak at the National Fire Chiefs Association annual conference about ethics in fire service leadership. Standing before an audience of fire chiefs from across the country, Daniel reflected on the lessons he had learned from his experience. "I spent 15 years believing that loyalty meant following orders without question," Daniel said. "I learned that true loyalty to the oath we take as firefighters, sometimes requires us to question authority and stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult." Daniel's story became a case study in fire service ethics programs across the country. His experience demonstrated that corruption could infiltrate even the most respected public safety agencies, and that individual courage was essential for maintaining the integrity of institutions that citizens depended on. For their safety, the Oakland Fire Department, under its new leadership, became a model for transparency and community engagement. Response times across all neighborhoods reached the national averages for urban fire departments, and public trust in the department was gradually restored. Chief Patterson's convictions sent a message throughout the fire service that corruption would not be tolerated and that firefighters who exposed wrongdoing would be protected and supported. Several other investigations were launched in different cities based on patterns similar to what Daniel had discovered in Oakland. For Daniel, the most meaningful recognition came not from official awards or media attention, but from the families whose lives had been saved by his courage to speak up. Letters from residents of East and West Oakland thanked him for ensuring that their neighborhoods would receive the same fire protection as wealthier areas of the city. The choice made. 5 years after exposing the conspiracy, Daniel Morrison continued to serve as a captain with the Oakland Fire Department. He had been offered positions with other agencies and had received inquiries about consulting opportunities, but he remained committed to serving the community where the corruption had occurred. On a quiet evening shift, Daniel received a call that took him back to East 14th Street, the same neighborhood where he had first defied Chief Patterson's order to respond slowly. This time, it was a kitchen fire in a ground-floor apartment. An engine 19 arrived in less than 4 minutes. Daniel and his crew quickly extinguished the fire, preventing it from spreading to other units in the building. As they were packing up their equipment, an elderly woman approached Daniel with tears in her eyes. "Captain Morrison, you probably don't remember me, but you saved my granddaughter 3 years ago in the apartment fire down the street. She's in high school now, honor roll student, wants to be a doctor. I just wanted to thank you again." Daniel smiled and shook the woman's hand. "That's what we're here for, ma'am. That's our job." As Daniel drove back to the station, he reflected on the choice he had made to expose Chief Patterson's corruption. It had cost him friendships, put his family at risk, and forced him to confront the reality that institutions he trusted could be corrupted by greed and indifference. But it had also reinforced his understanding of why he had become a firefighter in the first place. The uniform he wore represented a promise to protect and serve all members of his community, regardless of their economic status or the value of their property. When that promise was threatened by corruption, he had chosen to honor his oath rather than his chain of command. Daniel Morrison had learned that being a hero wasn't about running into burning buildings, although that was part of it. Being a hero was about making the right choice when it was easier and safer to make the wrong one. It was about standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves, even when it meant standing alone. The firefighter who had trusted his chief like a father had become the man who proved that some relationships aren't worth preserving when they come at the cost of innocent lives. And in a profession built on brotherhood and loyalty, Daniel had shown that the highest loyalty was to the oath they all took to serve and protect their community. Captain Morrison had made his choice, and Oakland was safer because of it. Sometimes, the people we trust most are the ones who betray us most deeply. Sometimes the orders we're given conflict with the oaths we've taken. Sometimes being loyal to an institution means being disloyal to the person who runs it. Daniel Morrison spent 15 years following Chief Patterson's orders without question, but when those orders meant letting people die for insurance money, he found the courage to choose justice over loyalty, truth over brotherhood, and lives over career. His story reminds us that heroes aren't always the ones who run into burning buildings. Sometimes they're the ones who light the fire that burns down corruption. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments below. If stories like this remind you that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it, hit that subscribe button and become part of our Justice System USA community. Have you ever had to choose between loyalty and conscience? Share your story in the comments, because here on Justice System USA, we believe that ordinary people with extraordinary courage are the real heroes in America's fight for justice.